This is a Musclecat Media production.
We're just days away, Rolsey. Days away from first pitch at the Under-18 World Cup. We're breaking it all down for you on Baseball Expats. What is the Under-18 World Cup? Who's in the Under-18 World Cup? We can answer those questions. We can't tell you who's going to win, but we can maybe help you form an opinion who that might be through our preview shows. We're breaking down Group B today to follow on to our Group A preview show. Rolsey, are you any more excited now about the Under-18 World Cup than you were a few days ago?
I am dangerously close to boarding a plane to Okinawa, so it is becoming real that the World Cup will begin soon. And look, the weather here in the Southern Hemisphere has not been the best. I've been checking the radar in Okinawa, and it's 28 to 30 degrees every day, and we're getting ready for a lot of really good baseball. So I am pumped for this tournament and pumped to chat a little bit of Group B, which I think is interesting for a lot of different reasons, maybe a few different reasons to why there's some intrigue in Group A. So excited to get into it with you.
For full transparency, Andrew Reynolds is one of the voices of the Under-18 World Cup and various other WBSC events, also calls the games for the Sydney Blue Sox. And for transparency, I do all the writing and media for Team Australia Baseball, who will be in this tournament as well as call some games in the ABL and at an ice rink near you as well. So that's our backstory. And don't forget, if you like this podcast, like and subscribe. That helps us a little bit too. We love to talk international baseball. Ran through it with the Under-12 World Cup. Doing it again with the Under-18 World Cup. If you want a background of what this Under-18 World Cup is, how it works, what the Super Round is, what the tournament format is, and more Pool A information, all you have to do is go listen to our last episode, the Pool A preview. We break that all down for you. We're not going to go into the nitty-gritty of how a Super Round works again. So some homework for you, or you just jump on Google, watch how the Super Round works. But effectively what it is, 2 groups, 6 teams, top 3 teams make it to the Super Round. Those 6 teams whittle it down to 2 by the end of it. Record carries over. Those are the high-level points. I'm blasting through it. Go back and listen to it if you want to know a little bit more. But there's 6 teams in Pool A, 6 teams in Pool B. Rolsey, should I read through the teams of Pool A and Pool B quickly, and we can get your first initial thoughts?
I think so.
Pool A, Cuba, Italy, Japan, Korea, Puerto Rico, and South Africa. Now, Jeff Duda from World Baseball Network and Tyler Maun, who's joining us again today, who's a WBC, World Baseball Classic commentator, does all the qualifiers, the big tournament, and all these WBSC events. He also broke it down for you and some interesting storylines there. 3 teams from Group A will emerge and play in the Super Round, then the latter half of the tournament, which runs September 5th to 14th. Now, in Group B is Australia, China, Germany, Panama, Chinese Taipei, and the United States of America. There's obviously some big baseball nations in this group. Rolsey, what first catches your eye when you take a look at Group B of the 2025 Under-18 World Cup presented by Raxus?
There's a few things in this group that are interesting, and I think the one thing that we didn't really set up in Group A that we can do in Group B, because the story's a little bit easier to tell, is that these underage World Cups have massive implications in terms of world ranking points for nations, right? And it's maybe something that we'll have a chat to Tyler Maun about. But when you look at countries like China and Germany, they may not be the first ones that stick out in terms of this group and, you know, maybe potential gold medal chances, especially with teams like the United States and Chinese Taipei that are present. But these are 2 nations right now that find themselves on the bubble of qualifying for a Premier 12 tournament in 2027. We'll get into that with Tyler and talk about what the permutations of all that might look like. But interestingly enough for me, looking at China and Germany, who I believe play each other on day 3 in Group B, is so interesting because there's just like tens of points that are separating these 2 teams, and each of them are kind of on the bubble for a Premier 12 spot. So it's not just about this tournament and the results of this tournament for those two teams. It's about what that national team program potentially could be pointing at for the next 18 to 24 months. And that, to me, adds a little bit more intrigue. Look, there's 1,000 other things that are interesting. I just know we didn't touch on that in the Group A preview. And that's one of the things that I'm really looking forward to in the early stages of Group B.
Group B for me is interesting because it's 6 nations with 6 completely unique baseball stories on how their respective ecosystems work, and they get to play each other in Group B for one of those 3 spots. So, let's go through this. Here's one thing I think that you should know about the baseball backgrounds about each of these countries and how they got there. In Australia, it's a place close to me, small baseball nation, right? Like they only have about 34,000 people that play baseball, and that's from 3-year-olds to 83-year-olds that play in the country. They had a national team camp, but it's a small community that always punches above their weight historically in these international tournaments. Australia's medaled 5 times at this under-18 World Cup over it. They made the quarterfinals of the World Baseball Classic, and they are above teams like Cuba in the world rankings. They're ranked number 10 in the world and safe, like you talked about, in the rankings for the Premier 12. So it's an overachiever from an outsider. But if you use the word overachiever to someone in the Australian baseball community, you will be have a little black mark on you. Like that language just doesn't happen, right? Like they think they belong there and they get to show it. China is interesting because it is one of the biggest populations in the world. All they need to do is find 20 kids in that 16 to 18 age group that can throw a ball hard, hit a ball hard, and play hard. Now, they're starting to develop. They made the super round of the under-23 World Cup. They've been in a World Baseball Classic. They've had some mixed results, but they pump money into these academies where they're effectively taking these high school kids and saying, all you will do is eat, sleep, and breathe baseball at these academies. And they don't play too much international games, so they're kind of unknown for opposing teams. They could be great, dude. Like China could be sneaky here, or they could go winless. I don't really know, but we're going to find out at this tournament. They kind of reveal what they have to the world at these tournaments. That will be intriguing. Germany, they qualified second in the under-18 tournament in Europe. Now, Germany, they're fascinating because they beat the Netherlands, and the Netherlands are traditionally a powerhouse in Europe at all levels. They beat them 6-1 to qualify, and they've got about 7 or 8 players who are returning from that team. They're interesting because a small ecosystem like Australia, most of these players play in the top level German league, and they're playing against 34, 35-year-old grown men regularly. Now they play against 17-year-olds. It might be a little bit of an advantage for Germany. Panama, rising nation, more and more affiliated players, more and more getting signed. They weren't traditionally like a powerhouse in the Latin America area, but now they are. Like they are firmly in the top 10 of a baseball nation, always contending at this tournament. Don't be surprised if Panama is that other team in the group. United States, they're the United States, man. Like they're the baseball powerhouse. They could have 2 potential number 1 picks on this team right now in the MLB draft. They've had dudes like Kershaw, Lindor, like they've had superstars play on this under-18 tournament before. The USA is the USA. I think people just assume the USA will be good at this, and they are. And the Chinese Taipei, they just won the Premier 12, so that senior kind of open world championships for the first time in their life cycle. But they're picking their team a little bit different this year, and we'll go through that with our guests coming up on how it's done. But a team that traditionally is always contending for a medal, that's picking their team a little bit differently, but there's no doubt that high school baseball in Taiwan, in Chinese Taipei, high school baseball in Chinese Taipei is the king of sports to play there, and they're picking their best team for it. So hopefully that helps give a background on it, but that's 6 teams with 6 different baseball systems that now all have to play one game against each other in this group.
Yeah, and the big question for the United States, I think, is going to be, can they bounce back? When you look historically at this team, I mean, let's go all the way back to Seoul in 2012. It's a team that won 4 consecutive world championships. They won 5 of 6, and in all 6 of those, they were in the world championship final. The only one that they dropped was back in 2019, and that was to Chinese Taipei, and that tournament that was in Korea. That was a really hotly contested tournament that went back in 2019. I think on the last day of the opening round, there were 8 different teams that were vying for the 6 super round spots. But then the United States, as Tyler will talk about, they were disappointing, finishing 4th out of the medals. They lost the bronze medal game in Taipei and Taichung a couple of years ago. And it was a team that felt like they were just disjointed. It's never going to be a question of talent with the United States, as you talked about. It's just going to be how well can a team of individuals like that gel? Because to your point, a lot of these other national team programs are players that have been together, have played with each other or around each other for much of their baseball playing lives. It's just not that way in the United States. This team of excellent individuals comes together for 2 or 3 weeks before they get on a plane and go to Okinawa, and they have to then gel and become a team that can play team tournament baseball in order to win world championships. Now, USA Baseball has been able to get teams to do that historically in the past. As talked about prior to 2023, they had won 5 of 6 world championship finals, but can they bounce back off of that disappointing showing that they had in 2023? That'll be intriguing for mine.
So Major League Baseball released a way too early mock draft for 2026. By the way, at time of recording, USA hadn't confirmed their roster. When you're listening to this, they have. So you can go and listen to it. That's just transparency. Probably Google the roster. Now, if you go through this, Rolsey, it's an interesting point. So 8 players are in high school in this top 20 mock draft for 2026. The top 20 players are in, 8 of them are in high school. But you're right. There's one from Mississippi, one from Texas, one from Florida, one from California, one from Oklahoma, one from Carolina, one from Florida again, another one from Texas, and another one from Florida. So it's very diverse in terms of where these players come from. Not one of them are teammates. None of them are teammates at all. Most of them are in different parts of the state. So yeah, you're very right. Top end talent, but they need to find a way to become united. Going against teams like Germany and Australia and China, they're already very tightly knit, right? Like these communities are small. The baseball communities are small. They all know each other. Chinese Taipei are picking their team, and it looks like a lot of players that played together in a recent high school tournament are going to be on the team together. That'll work in their favors. Transparency, I don't know too much about Panama in the system in Panama baseball, but they have a lot of talent as well. So it's a very interesting style and background, and I think our guest today should be able to break that down.
Yeah, and it's another interesting aspect of tournament baseball that makes it so much different than any sort of regular season baseball because of the amount of time that you have in order to gel and the differences in these national team programs. And the spectrum is so wide in Group B as compared to Group A. I think when you think about probably South Africa, they're maybe the one outlier. But again, that's a team that will be really well gelled because they'll all know each other. So it's so funny how you get some of these teams, maybe the teams that are made up of the best individuals might not have the most connectedness. And that's something that Tyler will talk about in terms of USA from a couple of years ago. So it's just another one of those interesting storylines when you come into tournament baseball is it a team of individuals that wins it or is it the best team? At times, both have done it. But it's another just interesting aspect of what makes this tournament so fascinating.
Once again, the teams are Australia, China, Germany, Panama, Chinese Taipei, and the United States of America. We're going to throw it over to our guest. You'll hear 2 voices during this one. We'll start with the second. We'll go an unconventional introduction. You'll hear Jason Pospishil. He's the manager of the Australian team. Now, Australia just finished a week-long camp where they had 34 players that they had to cut down to 20 to name this team. Interesting about Australia, all those other teams, they're in the middle of their baseball season. It's the summer. Australia could not be further away from when the baseball season started or finished to when it's about to start. Interesting perspective from Pops. But the first voice you'll hear is a voice you'll hear a lot if you watch international baseball, and for good reason. He is excellent at what he does and very measured in all of his thoughts and takes as well. Tyler Maun, he's the voice of the World Baseball Classic and a bunch of WBSC events. Great following as well if you want to go through just minor league or international baseball in general. You'll hear Tyler Maun, then Jason Pospishil, and then we'll be back to wrap it all up at the end of our Group B preview on Baseball Expats.
Well, he's back with us after his breakdown of Group A. We decided to get him back for Group B. That is voice of the U-18 World Cup, Tyler Maun. Tyler, good to see you again.
Fellas, always great to see you.
Felt like we just did this. Group B, sort of as we talked about with Group A, is kind of that three-tiered system again. I mean, you look at the United States and Chinese Taipei, potentially some interesting developments around the roster construction for Chinese Taipei. You sort of look at those two teams at the top end of town, and then you've got Panama and Australia, which you think potentially would be two teams vying for a super round. I mean, I know there's a lot of chatter around Australia that this team could be one of the best U-18 teams that they've put together, particularly pitching-wise. And then there's China and Germany as teams, maybe on the outside looking in, although saying that, China in the U-23 World Cup in Shaoxing just 12 months ago or so, were playing for a bronze medal, which nobody saw happening. And China's really ascending through the ranks and potentially could be either hosting or certainly playing in a Premier 12 qualifier next year. So they're a little bit of a wild card. This Group B, whereas maybe the top end of town in Group A seems a little bit solidified, I guess you could make that argument in Group B, but there are some interesting differences when we look at this group.
Yeah, the thing that's most interesting about this group to me is going to be what sort of USA Baseball squad we see. Because, to be honest, the 2023 team did not impress me from very early on in that event. They just looked really lost, did not look like a team that, I don't want to say there was a lack of care, but there was a lack of connectedness. If that makes sense. They just did not ever really seem to get to a stage where they were comfortable as a group. And it showed. I mean, in the way that team played, they were, essentially a slightly above 500 team. That's kind of what it ultimately ended up as for USA Baseball at the 2023 U-18 World Cup. And that is, essentially, that's been sort of unthinkable for USA Baseball in recent U-18 World Cups. They won their first game against the Netherlands. That was a 1-run game. They beat Spain the next game, but then lost to Japan. Ended up going into the Super Round feeling pretty good, but lost to Puerto Rico on the last day of the Super Round, got blanked by Korea in the bronze medal game. And it felt like for so many of these events where USA Baseball takes part, the early games, you can tell there are a lot of guys from a lot of divergent backgrounds, a lot of places across a very large country. They probably don't know each other very well. And day by day, they start figuring it out and they get closer and they get better. That didn't really seem to happen with that team 2 years ago. And there was a lot of talent on it, but there are so many differences between being talented and being a good team. And there just wasn't a lot of continuity on a day-to-day basis for that team. Now, all that being said, they still are going to field in any World Cup, maybe the most talented team out there. And this year's not going to be any different. But is that connectivity piece going to be there the way that it wasn't 2 years ago? That, I think, is the biggest thing. Behind them is Chinese Taipei. And this is a moment of, the baseball golden age in Taiwan. They just won Premier 12 at the end of 2024. They qualified for the World Baseball Classic, albeit in a very dramatic way, earlier this year in 2025. But they have had so much success in so many big-time events lately. What is that squad going to look like? The roster construction for that team seems like it's been a little bit different than what we've heard in years past for Chinese Taipei. But again, we know how much talent comes out of that place, whether it's at U12s, U15s, U18s, U23s, Premier 12, WBC. They are going to put an extremely talented roster on the field. Beyond them, I think it's way more open in this group than it is. If you're South Africa or if you're Italy, you've got a much harder road, I think, to get there by having to go through Cuba and Puerto Rico, likely to make it into one of those medal or super round spots. In Group B, I think beyond the U.S. and Chinese Taipei, it's sort of wide open. Australia, like you said, there's a lot of hype and a lot of good conversation around that Australia team. Panama has had some really big moments in WBSC events in recent years. We never really know what we're going to get out of Germany. There is always a good amount of talent. I remember the U-15 World Cup several years ago in Panama, just how fun the Germany team was to watch. And some of those guys, have now grown up and have gone on to play professionally in Europe or collegiately in the United States. So that's a possible team that could make a run. And in China, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. None of us expected China to be in the super round, much less playing for a medal at U23s last year. But they have been investing a lot in developing baseball in that country. And, they've got events on the calendar, big time baseball events on the calendar in the next few years. So they are more than likely going to be bringing a surprisingly pretty strong team. So I would think U.S. Chinese Taipei, you sort of pencil in out of Group B. But beyond those, it's anybody's game.
That's such an interesting point you made about connectivity, and it feels perfect that on this episode we have the head coach of the Australian under-18 team, Jason Pospishil, who will be talking to us, because if you look at Australia versus the USA, there's no question who the more talented team is going to be. There's no question who the more on paper dominant team is going to be. In the last episode, you listed off a bunch of guys that I thought you were rattling out a 90-win MLB team, but it was just the under 18 roster in 2017 for the USA. But if you take a look at Australia, they have right now, I mean, they'd had 34 guys at a selection camp, and all of those 34 players have grown up playing each other and playing with each other and going to camps and being part of national programs, being part of an under-16 development squad, and being part of these moments for this tournament. They're showing up to a training camp, and everybody knows each other. They know their names, they know their schools, they know their states, they know their positions, they know their moms, they know their dads, they know they're part of like a family. Now, that has to be Australia's advantage, if you can call it that they can hit the ground running because the coaches have a familiarity with each of the players. I got to imagine it's got to be so overwhelming to be a coach on that USA team and say, here are 617-year-olds, all of who are better than anyone Australia has at their best. Go pick 15 of them and make them like each other for 1 week so we can win a gold medal. It's such an interesting point that you used the word connectivity that I hadn't really looked at before, and that is why Australia always believes they're a sneaky chance to cause an upset because they think they can play together and play the right way. Doesn't always happen, but that's kind of the strategy that they go with too.
Yeah, and I mean, I think if you look at the most recent darlings of international baseball, Czechia, the Czech Republic, which now goes by Czechia on the international sports scene, that's the way they did it. They started identifying players, at 10 years old or 12 years old and trying to bring them through playing baseball all the way, because you can't just pull kids in at 15 or 16 in non-baseball countries and expect them to stick with it. You got to make sure that these guys are, like you said, growing up together, learning how to play together, and that ability to go on a field and know what the guys around you are capable of and what they are going to put out there for you. That's big, especially if you are overmatched talent-wise, because there are a lot of times when the more connected underdog group takes wins from the more talented and maybe a little bit more, I don't want to say individualistic, but less in tune group. We see upsets like that all the time in sports. And that, I think, for non-traditional baseball countries is huge. If you can build those foundational pieces, if you can construct things on those pillars of your athletes having known each other for the majority of their lives, I would take that rather than, we're not the most, baseball rich country, but we need to get just the most talented players. We'll throw them all together in a blender for a few weeks and see what comes out of it. I'd rather have a group that knows each other better, because I think those little pieces, those little communication pieces, if you're in the outfield and you know the range of the guy to your left and to your right, you know the ball that you can get to or the ball that he can get to that you can't. Same stuff in the infield. If you don't have to communicate who's covering on this throw, how are we going to, play this bunt defense? Those sorts of things are massive, especially in short tournaments, because if that makes the difference between, a one-run win over a powerhouse, then you look back on all of the things that you've done for your entire baseball lives, and it's all been worth it to that point, rather than a circumstance where you're in a tied game late and, you're playing Chinese Taipei or Japan or Korea or Puerto Rico or whoever, and somebody drops a bunt down and there's a miscommunication because you don't know where you're supposed to be. That element of everybody being on the same page, knowing their coaches, knowing their fellow athletes, that stuff plays a really big role in short tournament formats.
Look, we didn't touch on it much in our Group A preview, but I think it's a really interesting aspect of this tournament is looking ahead to the December 31 deadline that will lead to the Premier 12 that happens in 2027. But part of the process of this new Premier 12, which is essentially a Premier 16 or Premier 18, call it whatever you want, is the qualification process. And when you look at China and Germany in this group, and then look at them where they stand currently in the world rankings at 17 and 18, they're right there on that bubble of being one of those automatic qualifying teams. For those that don't know, the top 12 in the world rankings from December 31 this year will go through to the Premier 12 in 2027. The next 6 teams, that being 13 through 18, will automatically advance into 2 qualifying tournaments, and then there will either be 19 and 20, which currently China is ranked number 19, or it will be teams that decide to host those events. So it's such a fascinating thing for me because Germany right now are the bubble team. They're 18th in the world, knowing that they need to perform to maintain points that'll be replaced from points a couple of years ago. So they need to perform. And China, right now, they're on the outside looking in. And if they're not a host at this point, granted, this is August 22nd when we're recording, it's not December 31st. But if that qualification process were to be determined right now and China weren't a host, they would not be in the Premier 12. So it's another really interesting aspect of this tournament because this is the last chance for a lot of these nations to get those final bits of points. It looks like the top 12 is pretty well locked in. I don't know that there's any way because Colombia is sort of that 13 team. Italy is 14, so with an amazing U-18s, there's a potential that Italy could maybe knock on the door for automatic qualifying, but they would probably need to medal for that to happen. So there's really no danger, I think, of anyone in the top 12 from falling out. But when you look at sort of that 16 to 18 and China being on that 19 bubble, it's a really interesting storyline for mine going into this tournament.
And you know what I think is so cool about it is the way that the success or the failure of a national federation is built on the success or failure of every team. It's not just, well, what does your big league level team do? What does your senior level team accomplish? If you're the U-18 team, and let's say you're Italy and you go out and you play an absolute dream 10 days of baseball and you find a way to medal, there is the potential that you jump Colombia and you find your way into that 13 spot. I don't think they can run down Cuba based on how everything falls points-wise. But, Cuba's another one. Cuba's got to be able to play a successful brand of ball and not stumble in the opening round and find themselves in the placement round because they're sitting 12th right now, which would have been inconceivable this time, even 15 years ago. So I like that element of what WBSC's rankings are, that it has to be everybody pulling their weight. All of your teams, all of the continental and regional competitions that you play in, the stuff that you do to qualify for World Cups themselves, and then the World Cups themselves. All of those factors play into your ranking points going into these crucial stages where we're going to determine the Premier 12 field and qualifiers and all the rest. So, I think for Germany, this is huge. For China, it's going to be really interesting because, as you said, there's a potential for maybe a host spot there. We know U-18s is going to be there in 2 years. So this is sort of the moment. We've heard about baseball in China and how, there are resources dedicated to it and all of that for, over 20 years now. I think a lot of people in baseball have wondered, when is that going to show up? When is that going to manifest itself in a Chinese-born and developed professional player who attains some success, whether it's in the United States or elsewhere? But these talents seem to be coming along. The U-23 team was that way last year, and we'll see what they're able to do at U-18s this year. Keep in mind, this is a place where if you have facilities built and you have the dedication to development, there is an unlimited base of athleticism and talent that you can pull from in China. And so that potentially is the next step for that national program is, all right, let's start competing and placing in high spots in these World Cups. And we saw it at U23s. Who knows what we're going to see at U18s. So it is crucial for those teams who are right around that bubble. The other interesting thing about it is looking at the teams right now that are sort of on the outside looking in. Canada has dropped back to 20th. Brazil we've seen climb at various times, whether it's been in the World Baseball Classic. They qualified, obviously, for 2026. We've seen them at younger World Cups as well. The countries that have moved up and have fallen back, if you looked at the WBSC rankings from 2015 versus 2025, it is a wildly different picture internationally. Maybe save the top 4 or 5 countries in the world, but there's been a lot of movement outside of that.
The rankings is what makes Group B so intriguing to me. I'm glad you touched on that, Rolsey. And you just have to take a look at the schedule for how this could play out. So let me throw a couple scenarios out for you. Just like you identified, Germany need to produce some results here to claim some points. Australia also want to kind of like their target is the super round and getting there too. Well, take a look at this. Australia's first 3 games, they get to go against Germany, Panama, and China. And then they play the 2 powerhouses at the end. In the ideal world for Australia, they beat those first 3 teams, and then you can take a shot at one of those super round teams and potentially head to the super round with a 1-1 record, 4-1 in the group. Like the pathway and the road is very clear and there. On the other hand, if you're Germany, you're looking at teams and saying, hey, we need to get a couple teams above us. You're probably circling Australia on your calendar. You're circling China on your calendar, and you play Australia first. Everyone's already rested. You're throwing your ace, your best guy, the person that can be the most harmful to any batting lineup versus Australia. And Australia is like, okay, this Germany game maybe isn't as easy as what they would like it to be. And then all of a sudden, Germany's on the board and Australia is chasing their tail. Meanwhile, China's seeing this and they're seeing Australia and Germany throw their aces at each other. And they're like, all right, we're going to have an opportunity here. So the way the schedule has set up, you take a look at Australia, it could be boom, it could be bust because of that. Germany, if you wanted to play any of those teams, you wanted Australia first because you get to play your best arm first. So I think the schedule has really lended itself to a bit of drama on the big picture ticket items, just as you boys have discussed. So when it comes to the actual micro elements of it, it's perfect that way WBSC drew this up.
The other thing, too, that's interesting about it is if you get that first win out of the way, then you're set up for – you're going to be alive for the rest of the opening round. If you take a loss on day 1, you're already behind the 8 ball because these are 2 groups in which it's likely that we'll have a 5-0 group winner, a 4-1 second-place finisher, and then you're fighting among those other 4 teams to figure out who's going to move on. And it could be – 2-3-2 teams, 2-2-3 teams, whatever it is, however the math works out. You have to be able to beat the teams. There are games where you have zero margin for error. If you're Germany, if you're Australia, if you're China, to a lesser extent, I think Panama, if you drop a game against any of those other 3 teams, you're in a bad spot because you're looking at likely losses against the U.S. and Chinese Taipei. And if you drop a game against anybody else, that's 3 losses in a 5-game opening round. You're probably not moving on.
If you are able baby.
Yeah, right, exactly. And that's the thing. You can find your way through if everything falls perfectly. But you have to, and I mean, I think it's a great point, Eric, that if you are going into game 1 and it is a game that you feel is winnable and you have all hands on deck, that's a good spot. Because it feels like the other spot that you might want to be in is, all right, let's just get the U.S. and Chinese Taipei out of the way early. And if we drop those couple of games, hopefully we'll be fresh enough that we can make a run in the final few games. But yeah, it's an interesting, again, it's one of the things that I love about doing these events is we dive in on that first day and it's like you get one breath and all of a sudden it's day 5. and you're looking at all these different permutations of who can move on, who's going to be this seed coming out of Group A, who's this seed coming out of Group B, what the cross-pool matchups are going to look like. It's fascinating. It's so different from the regular baseball that people are accustomed to, but I love it for that reason.
Panama's going to be feeling the pressure on day 2, right? Like they play USA game 1. You assume it's going to be a loss. They could win. Panama could surprise a USTA finding their foot. And then they play Australia in their second game. And that, for both of those teams, could be the game that determines who goes to the super round. Or Australia lost to Germany and Australia's like, uh-oh, we need to win this one bad. So that day 2 matchup is the interesting one too. We're going to break down, Rolsey and I, everything, the state of play after day 2 of the tournament as well. But there's some permeations there, eh, Rolsey?
Yeah, well, and like Tyler said, sort of day 3 is where we start doing like arithmetic on air, and it gets a little bit ugly if teams at the top are starting to beat each other. The scenario that Tyler gave is the perfect one, right? You've got a team at 5-0, you've got a team at 4-1, maybe you've got one at 3-2. And it's easy to tell that story, but that's not the fun one, right? We like when there's 3 teams at the top at 4-1, and you're talking about TQB and who allowed runs against who and those sorts of things. And that makes for a competitive tournament. But I do agree with Tyler that I think, in large part, you've got 2 powerhouses in each of these 2 groups that would be going in thinking anything but the super round is not a failure. You don't want to say that necessarily, but it would be a disappointment not to get to the super round. And then you've got all these other teams scratching and clawing. And oftentimes that's the story that we tell in the lead up to these tournaments, but very rarely does it end up that way. Look at U23s in Shaoxing last year. Nicaragua and China were playing for the bronze medal. I don't think any of us, if you had sat us down, and Chinese Taipei didn't make the super round, right? Chinese Taipei at U12s just this past year didn't win a medal for the first time in that tournament's history. So it's all well and good for us to sit here and say this is what it looks like will happen at the top of each of these groups, but very rarely, as is the case, I think, in all sports and in all tournament sports, which is why tournament baseball is so great, that it very rarely happens the way that we think it will. And that's probably just as true in this U-18 tournament, Tyler, as it is in any of these underage World Cups. The amount of parity that you see in these tournaments, I think, is probably as great, if not greater, than any of the other World Cups.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we do see, like I said, these are some of the most talented rosters that you will ever see on a baseball field, regardless of age, regardless of, professional status or anything else. But it is always a circumstance by the end where the cream rises to the top. In the entire history of the U-18 Baseball World Cup, going back to when it was the World Junior Baseball Championship starting in the early 80s, and then it was the 18U Baseball World Championship, there have only been 7 countries that have medaled in total. And we talked about how it's been the same 4 since 2015 with the U.S., Japan, South Korea, and Chinese Taipei. There are a lot of good stories every time we go into U-18s, but it almost always feels like we get down to those last couple of days in the super round and you sort of know that the Final Four is going to be the Final Four that you're accustomed to. So that's going to be the interesting thing this year is we see so much of the democratization of baseball and how much talent there is and how much good baseball is being played around the world. Is this the year where we get a surprise where Italy or Germany can make a run into the super round, or where Panama is playing for a medal, or Puerto Rico or somebody from the Americas who isn't the U.S. or Cuba necessarily. That's the coolest thing about U-18s to me is it does feel like, even though the majority of the hardware has been taken home by a usual cast of characters, there is so much talent across the board on all these rosters that it feels most like the WBSC event in which we could have a true Cinderella team go off for a week and a half and all of a sudden they're on a medal stand.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think the potential for parity at the U-18 level, I think, is as high as it is. And there's usually always 1 or 2 teams that sneaks into the super round, i.e. a Netherlands or a Mexico or a Canada, who aren't, obviously those 2 teams aren't participating in this event, but the possibility of parity, I think, is as great in the super round in this tournament as any other.
Well, Tyler, thank you very much for joining us. I look forward to watching a week of major leaguers playing baseball. We just don't know who those major leaguers will be yet, but that is almost a certainty. It should be a fun one. If you didn't want to hear the Pool A preview. You can listen to the previous episode of this, and we'll try to catch up in the middle of the tournament. Tyler, thank you so much for giving us your insights, and have a good call at the tournament.
Guys, thanks as always. I appreciate it. Rolsey, I'll see you soon.
See you soon, brother.
Group B preview continues, and who better to help tee up one of the teams than the guy that's coaching the team? It's the manager of Australia, Jason Pospishil. Pops, you've been involved with a few international tournaments before, both as an assistant coach, as a manager, or a head coach, however you want to say it, in whatever part of the world. You're looking forward. This is your first year as head or as the main manager for under 18s, though. Am I right or wrong on that?
I did one 18U team as a manager, I think in 2014
okay.
or 15 in Taichung. That was the first time, but it's been a while since I've done it. What's that? Almost 11 years, I think. So nice to have the opportunity again.
Had the women's a couple years ago, though, in 2023. So, I mean, you're no stranger to international baseball tournaments. As a manager from Australia, I mean, Japan versus Australia when it comes to baseball nations. USA versus Australia. We know that, USA has the top talent in the world. Japan has the top talent in the world. But Australia has been sneaky in the past in tournaments, and especially in the under 18 World Cup. Has 5 medals in this event historically before. So usually around the mark and able to push there. How do you navigate this as a manager from the world might view Australia as sort of an underdog nation? How do you view Australia and navigating into a tournament like this?
Yeah, our philosophy is that, we're obviously a tournament-centered team. We only get together to really play in tournaments, and people that have been around tournament baseball will know that you've only got to get hot for 7 to 10 days, right? You win a couple of games that people don't think you're supposed to win, and it puts you right in the mix then. And we're pretty happy with the group that we've got. We had a couple of pro guys that are unfortunately unavailable that would have been on the team, but the depth of this roster is probably deeper than it has been the last couple of campaigns. So, you know what, like I just said, tournament baseball, anything can happen, right? So you line up your pitching, you get a couple of results go your way, and you're into the super round. And then once you're in the super round, it's like the tournament starts again. So, we've been sneaky in the past, and we're planning on being sneaky at this one too.
Pops, I think something that goes under the radar at tournaments that are this time of year, and we were talking to Jeff Duda in an earlier preview that we did for Group A about Japan coming off of Koshen, a huge, high school baseball tournament. It's the time of the year where they're playing baseball everywhere in the Northern Hemisphere. Every team except for Australia that is in this group is coming off of a long baseball season or a long lead-up period, a long preparation time. Whereas in Australia, you don't necessarily have that advantage, right? Because you're coming out of a winter season where you're basically moving into what would be baseball season. Is that a unique challenge? I mean, it's unique to Australia because it's Southern Hemispheric. I mean, South Africa are having to deal with that in Group A. You're the only team really having to deal with that in Group B. But do you see that as a unique challenge and a unique hurdle, I guess, that you have to overcome to face some of these teams that, will likely be at the peak of their powers because they've been playing baseball regularly for the last 3-4 months, or maybe your guys are just ramping up for a Southern Hemispheric summer season?
Yeah, it is a unique challenge, mate. And I think, but it's something that we know. We've dealt with this for 20, 30, 40 years, however long WBSC events have been going, right? So it isn't ideal for us because our winter is where we tend to, like some of our players are not even playing winter baseball at the moment. They've just been working out in their relative state team high performance programs and getting ready. Some of the states are playing, and if they are playing, those guys are playing 1 game a week. So when you look at it from a pure baseball sense, is it ideal preparation? Well, the answer to that question is realistically no, it's not. But it isn't something that we haven't had to deal with before. So the guys that are in their relative state programs under their performance leagues do a great job in getting as best prepared physically as possible. And we know as a country and as a staff that we are limited in our preparation, right? So we sort of, put together a game plan or a plan of attack based around that in how we want to play the game, and we try and simplify things. And, we're not going to be able to, when you're on the field for, I think we're on the field for a week just here on the Gold Coast, and then when we go to Japan, we're on the field, I think, for 3 days. And then we've got to go, strap it on and go get them, right? So it's not an excuse. You can't use it as an excuse, because if it was an excuse, we'd never go.
That's true. That's a good point.
The WBSC events around this time every year, we know that. Does it help our Northern Hemisphere friends? Absolutely. Does it hamper us in the Southern Hemisphere? The answer to that is yes, but we have to deal with it. And you two guys know, living down under, right? The Aussie way is let's go get them. It's just in our culture. We don't take a back seat to anybody, right? So it's just something we have to deal with, and the guys embrace it. And when you come to a tournament, anything can happen.
This is such an interesting tournament because these kids are 16, 17 years old. And I mean, Rolsey, I think Jeff Duda said it best, that like players in this tournament are going to have a significant impact on the baseball world in the very near future. But they're still developing. There's 16 and 17-year-old kids. Must have been interesting for you because you managed this team at the qualifiers in December. There's a number of players that have rolled over, 7 or 8 players that are now on this squad. You would have touched base with them a month later at Australia's National Under-18 Championship. They would have finished their summer seasons. They would have then gone into this workout phase. But those boys are still growing in those 8 months. So I'm sure from a developmental standpoint, there would have been a few touch points that you would have been curious about over the last 7-8 months from when you last were working one-on-one with them and not from afar.
Yeah, I think evaluation-wise, once we got through the qualifier, I started to have in my mind what I thought that our best 20 players was going to look like. I tend to do that. That's sort of my default, is to have a blueprint in my mind of what I think it's going to look like, and then adjust from there. There's guys that have definitely made performance improvements that we needed them to make from December through to now. And I don't want to sound, well, I'm not being disrespectful to New Zealand, but once we beat them, a lot of the guys, I said, listen, you've got to understand, when you're going to a World Cup now, you're not playing teams that are the caliber that you just played. You're playing teams that are way, way, way more advanced than that. And that means that there's some, boxes that you have to tick in your preparation to be able to compete, especially from a speed of the game point of view. Guys getting up the line in 4.7, 5 flat doesn't happen too often, for example, at a World Cups. We've seen especially differences in body shape, from strength gains. For a lot of the guys have gained strength, gained velocity on the mound, maybe added another pitch or two to their repertoire. Pitchability's better. I think defensively we're going to catch the ball pretty cleanly, which is a positive. But we saw that from the group in December. I thought the group in December were outstanding. But it's a exciting group, and you're right. There's some guys in this team that hopefully they get a chance and they play well over the course of the 2 weeks in Japan, and they can showcase themselves to the world, and that leads to maybe future collegiate or professional opportunities. And that's what it's all about. That's a rewarding thing as a coach, manager, is you're working with these guys and you see them play well on the world stage, and that could be, the turnkey moment that opens the door that allows them to go on and start their careers.
Pops, I know Eric wants to maybe ask you about a few of those specific guys. Maybe we'll park that for a second. I think also just about the development angle and the scouting angle of this tournament as well. But let's focus on some of those teams that you talk about. I mean, you're moving on from playing in that Oceania region, and then you're getting there in Group B. You've dodged Japan and Korea, but you do have Chinese Taipei and the United States in this group. I mean, we chatted with Tyler Maun earlier, and all of us really felt like, aside from the United States, there's maybe not a favorite to be the second best team in this group. Chinese Taipei have changed a few ways that they've assembled this roster. Could work, it couldn't. I mean, it's yet to be seen. Like you said, tournament baseball is tournament baseball. An egg could be on our face on day 6 of this tournament. But what is your overall assessment of Group B and the opponents that you have, and sort of what your approach is looking at those opponents coming into the opening round of this tournament?
Yeah, I did a little exercise actually in the camp this week on the Gold Coast, and I went through the 12 nations that are going to Okinawa and where we sit 1 to 12 in the world rankings. We actually sit 6th at the moment out of them 12 teams. So by world rankings, we should progress to the super round if the games were to go by world ranking. We know that's not the case, right? Anyone can beat anyone on any given day. So, our mentality is that, listen, I know it's an old cliche, but it is. It's one game at a time. You line up your pitching and you're trying to win game 1, and then you reevaluate where you are pitching-wise and health-wise, and then you go out at game 2. And, for us, the first 3 games, Germany, Panama, China, they're 3 big games. They're probably 3 must-win games that we have to win. And then we see where we are. And based on results of the other games within the pool, then it's, do we have to win these games against Taipei, and do we have to win this game against USA? And then you try and line your pitching up to win them too. It could get to a stage where we get to the USA game and maybe we don't have to win. Maybe we've already qualified for the super round, and now you're starting to, okay, well, how do we line up our pitching for the super round? This is the beauty of tournament play. I don't, you can go in with a plan A, and then in 2 days' time, you might be at plan X. So these are just things that happen. But, I like our group. I think that, those first 3 games are going to be paramount. And then after those first 3 games, we sort of, reevaluate where we're at, and then we go out and we can, essentially everyone's trying to beat everyone on every given day, right? I think that's just the harsh reality of the tournament play. But knowing that you've got to be able to pivot, you've got to be able to have like I said, plan A, B, C, D, all the way down to X. And, runs for and against come into it. Tiebreakers come into it. There's all these intangible factors.
TQB.
Yeah, there's all these intangible factors that come into it on the outside, which you've got to be across. And that essentially, when you take into consideration all them factors, you try and put a plan together and go get them the next day.
I'm excited to ask you this one, Pops, because we've had a couple guests on. It was a great answer to the question. That was right what we needed. But I'm excited to ask you this one because we've asked all of our guests that have kind of looked through a bit of the different teams. There's like Team USA, like Jacob Lombard's going to get some headlines. He might be the number 1 overall pick next year, right? So it's easy to go look at that guy on Japan that can throw 98 miles per hour. Cool. Like, he's going to get some headlines. I've been loving to ask people, give me a name that maybe I haven't heard of before that could surprise. And you're the coach of a team. So maybe can you give me a guy on Australia that's not a Mitch Evans who's signed professionally? Josh Nadai's played in this tournament before. Who's kind of taken you not necessarily by surprise, but you thought, man, this guy, he's climbing the Pops list a little bit right here.
You've got a young right-handed arm, Patrick Crotty from Queensland, who was really impressive in the camp. I'm not going to give away too much, but he was pretty good. And then position player wise, we're pretty solid across the board. We have our shortstop, Benny Nesbitt. He's played in the ABL. You mentioned Mitch Evans. We got young Josh Nadai, the brother of Jimmy Nadai, who's on our team. And I believe he's committed to Stanford. I could be wrong, but I definitely
think he's going to
Oregon, maybe. Yeah. Oregon. Yeah. So, and then in the outfield, we got some like a James McFarlane from South Australia. He was really impressive in camp. We got some nice pieces, mate. We got some really nice pieces. But, the thing for me is that it's not about 1 or 2 guys. It's 20 guys that are all got to play their individual role, no matter what that is. And just keep in mind that they're playing for the name on the front of the jersey and not the name on the back. And while there's a lot of people that share the same name on the back that have helped get them there, once we got on that plane and we go to Okinawa, it's, about us as a group. And the energy and the camaraderie amongst the group in camp was outstanding. Outstanding. One of the best groups I've been around. Like, they were going at it, 2 teams each day, and the end of the day, they'd all meet in the mound and we'd have our debrief, and they're all high-fiving each other and picking each other up if they had a bit of a rough day, or celebrating some wins, and it was really, really cool to see. Really cool to see. So I like mentally where we're at as far as being a tournament, a team, centered tournament team. I think I like where we're at.
It's a story that we hear a lot. I mean, we see it with our own eyes watching a lot of these underage World Cups, particularly probably at 12s and 15s, but I think also at the 18-year-old level as well. It's a story that we hear often, is that teams just really improve as time goes on in this tournament. I mean, you're telling us that you're seeing that as part of the training camp. You're seeing that team improve and the camaraderie rise day by day, right? So you don't have a 162-game season to do that. You have to do that in such a short period of time. So it's always interesting to see how those teams come in with confidence, and that confidence, I guess, can only grow as a tournament progresses. And we often see that on the field, where a team may come in, timid games 1 and 2, and by the time they're playing game 9, they look like a completely different team. And I guess my question for you as a manager is, I mean, you said it there before that you come in with plan A and you may have to use plan X in terms of personnel that you use. But I think what's fascinating to me is maybe there's that 1 or 2 guys that just make the roster, that are there for one reason or another, and you're not necessarily sure how you're going to use them.
Yeah, we're a very versatile team. We ended up picking 12 position players, but 3 of those 12 can also pitch really, really well. And so essentially we've got 11 arms that we can utilise. So that was, in my mind, a positive, and something that I wanted to explore going into the camp. Is we knew we had some versatility, and I know that some of the guys on the coaching staff that are very, very experienced, Damien Shanahan, Shane Watson, they've been around tournament baseball for a long time. They said it's been a long time since we've had 3 genuine two-way players that can play on both sides of the ball and play on both sides of the ball to an international standard. So that gives me a lot of confidence that we have the versatility to be able to mix and match against certain teams, against lefty righty, bullpen matchups. It gives us a lot of versatility. And I think that it's important for us in tournament play. Listen, the harsh reality, guys, is that, and I think Dave Nielsen has echoed this with the national team, and it works its way down. We know that if we have to play USA or Japan or Korea in a 162-game season, we're not going to win too many games, right? We might win 40 and lose 120 as an example. But in a tournament, if you prepare the right way and you're versatile enough, you can beat anyone on any given day. Back in 2014, 2015, whenever it was, we were in Taichung, we beat USA 1-0, and they had a team of 20 that all went in the draft, and we beat them 1-0. Anything can happen, right? And that's my mentality, is to make sure that we've got a team that is as versatile as possible. We've got positional coverage all over the field. We've got a really good mix, lefty, righty through the lineup. We've got a good mix of lefty, righty starters / bullpen. So we're a pretty well balanced team. We've got some guys that can run. The power aspect offensively, whether that's going to play in the ballparks in Okinawa, we're not sure. Obviously, big ballparks, humid weather, whether the ball's going to fly, we're not sure. But I think overall, the balance and the versatility of the team is something that I really, really like.
Last one from me, Pops. And if you're from around the world, you probably don't know too much about Australian baseball, right? I didn't know a lot about Australian baseball when I first came over here, and I love Australian baseball more than most things in the world it's turned out to be. But what does playing, from your perspective, playing for a national team in the life of an Australian baseball player at any level mean to the Australian baseball community? Because to me, it's just something that hits a little bit different.
Yeah, we're such a small baseball community in this country, and everyone knows everybody, right? And I think when you can tell, your friends, your family, the people around you that you've had the opportunity to represent your country, you're considered the best 20 players for your age group in your sport in your country. And I think it's starting to mean more now. What's our population now? Around 28 million. And you're one of the best 20 in your sport in your country. That means a hell of a lot. And we punch well above our weight population-wise for where we are in the world rankings compared to some of the other countries around the world. And we really do play a development in an imperfect system. Like our kids are going through programs which are user pay. They're paying to be there. It's not like they're getting scholarships or they're getting paid and their federation, like someone said to me the other day, the Puerto Rican team's just finished up like a 60-game college summer ball schedule. Like we're not in the financial position to do that. Our guys are paying to do programs to get themselves prepared to represent their country in a World Cup. And I think that for the general baseball public, not just in Australia, but around the world, that's the sacrifice that our kids have to make to represent their country. It's hard when I've got to sit across from a table and tell kids that unfortunately they didn't make the roster when I know the sacrifice that they've put in. Now, I know it's part of the job, but that doesn't make it any easier. And I think that the one thing I kept in mind is that we let go some really good baseball players and some players that maybe aren't a fit for us right now on the team, but have very bright futures ahead of them from a projection point of view to go and play collegiately or go and play professionally. And it also works the other way. I've managed guys, 15U, 18U national teams, and they never go to anywhere else other than playing club baseball in Australia. So the thing with, picking a team, national team around tournaments is it's really a right now mentality. Who's the best fit for us right now, today, to help us go and win a world championship or a medal? And for the people that miss out, yeah, that sucks. And I really feel for them. It's gut-wrenching for me to have to tell them that. But then it's also very rewarding when you tell a kid that, hey, congratulations, you've made the club, and they burst out crying with happy tears. That's just, the other night I had to tell some kids, and one of them, I started tearing up myself. I had one start, and I was like, holy shit, man, get yourself together. But it's like, that's how much it means to them. And if it means that much to them, hopefully it means as much to, our fans and the baseball community here, because we are such a small community, and there's a responsibility. It's a privilege, sorry, and it's a responsibility to wear that uniform. There's some great people, great players that have come before them, before us, that have represented our country. For example, the 04 Olympic team, I played with a lot of them guys on Claxton Shield teams. I still mates with them. I've coached with them, and you've got to keep in mind that there's pioneers that have come before us that have allowed us to be able to do what we're doing now. And that's stories that you guys do a great job of telling, because people need to know that. And hopefully this team will be able to write their own story.
One of my favorite parts about seeing that team get announced, and it is with any Australian national team too, you go on social media and you see what it means to those baseball clubs that these kids come from, right? Like where they're playing winter ball at, where they're playing summer ball at, where they played T-ball at, and all those little connections that they have from playing on grounds that might be like where James McFarland's from, right? Like right now, that is not a baseball field. It is a footy oval, and a footy team plays there, AFL. And then in 3 days, they will turn it into a baseball diamond for 6 months so kids can play on that. Like I love watching all the support networks feel that sense of pride too, because it is them representing them at the most organic club, volunteer, play because you love it reasons. That's one of my favorite things of watching a national team get named, because it doesn't get much more representative than that. You're not just representing your country. It goes smaller or bigger than that, however you want to look at it. You're representing the dad that's out there marking the lines at 6 a.m. so the Division 8 team at your baseball club can play a game of baseball. And I think that's one of the coolest things about baseball in Australia, just to put a bow on your beautiful your beautiful response there, Pops.
Yeah, that's baseball in Australia in a nutshell, right? I mean, what's the saying? It takes a village to raise a player. And, I've obviously had opportunities, been very fortunate to coach internationally, professionally, and run high performance programs here. And you have players that go through your program and they go and graduate and they're able to go and play collegiately. Like, I was fortunate to have, for example, Bazana and Iredale and these guys that have gone on to do great things so far. But people just see the high performance component of it, I think, and don't understand the journey that these kids have gone through. Like Trav Bazana, I think, started playing T-ball at his club when he was 4 years old and used to run around and say, I want to play in the major leagues. I wanted to be a major leaguer. I just wasn't a very good player. But I wanted to be a major leaguer. And just from seeing guys, I remember seeing the story that our senior men's national team did in Fuchu last year, and seeing our CEO, good friend of mine, Willow, get emotional about being able to see Craig Shipley play on Dodger Stadium. That's cool. Like I watched that, and when Willow started, I was the same. I started tearing up because I know Willow really well, and Willow was a mentor to me. I watched him play as a kid when he played for the Sydney Blues and the Sydney Storm at Parramatta Stadium and Concord Stadium, and I was there as a kid watching them guys play and then having the opportunity. It's surreal. It's just absolutely surreal. And I think that, people in the baseball community here in Australia do a great job of celebrating their wins when they see their little James McFarland or their little Travis Bazana starting T-ball for their club at 4 years of age and then make a national team and get to watch them on TV. That shit's cool. That's really cool.
Well, Pops, I think you've given us a really in-depth, not only us, but the international baseball world and the lead up to this tournament, a really real and a very raw instance of kind of what this means for Australia. And look, Australia is unique in a lot of different ways, but certainly is not unique in the fact that they are heading to Okinawa with one goal in mind, and that goal is to win a world championship. So thanks so much for your time, Pops, and look, go well. I mean, this is a tournament, as Eric said at the start of the interview, that has fared relatively well in this tournament in the past. Have medaled 5 times, a silver medal back in Thunder Bay in 2010. So certainly looking forward to see how the Aussies go. Thanks for giving us some time, and good luck in Okinawa, Pops.
Oh, you're welcome, guys. Thanks for the good wishes. Thank you.
Such a refreshing and interesting take to hear Jason Pospishil just give a little bit of emotion about what this tournament means. I think oftentimes we can look at, the makeup of these rosters and national teams and think of them as just, as baseball players. But I think Jason Pospishil did such a good job of explaining what it means to put on a national team jersey. I mean, he gave us that story from an Australian perspective, but so many of these nations that'll be playing at a U-18 World Cup would be feeling the exact same way. And for him to, he was getting a little bit emotional chatting to us about that. So I really enjoyed that sort of raw, emotional chat that we had with Jason Pospishil. And again, thanks to him and Tyler Maun for helping us break it all down. Eric, off the back of those two conversations, what's sort of that one burning question that you still have for Group B?
I think my question is, what will Panama be? And that comes from a couple different places. One of a baseball interest and another of an Australian interest, right? Like, I'm not going to hide it. Obviously, I do work with Team Australia Baseball. I'm Australian. Don't let the accent fool you. And it feels like for Australia to make the Super Round, they will need to beat the games they're meant to win, which is China and Germany. Now, Germany's probably throwing their ace, as we talked about, against Australia in the first game. Now, the problem with China is China beat Australia for a spot in the Super Round in the Under-23 World Cup, so nothing is given. But Panama are a top 10 team in the world. They have prospect teams that play regularly in the USA. They're a Latin American country that loves baseball. And they're a bit of an unknown quality from an Australian perspective. So I am just keen to see what kind of top-end talent they have. Should be some good ones. They have a couple players that are in the top 100 of the MLB prospect rankings. They won't be playing in this tournament, but it's sort of an indication that they're able to develop top-end talent and perform at the tournament. And Panama, historically, is making a bit of a rise at these different international events. They weren't contenders in the past, and now they're starting to factor into some more equations. So for me, I'm looking forward to seeing what Panama have, because I feel like that is the game Australia needs to have to get through the group stage. But Panama might be looking at saying, we can beat Chinese Taipei and maybe we can make a run at the USA. And Panama might have sights of trying to go with the 2-0 group record into the Super Round in the next round. So what are Panama is my question.
And I know we asked a few questions there around Chinese Taipei. And the fact is that we really don't know what the makeup of this team is going to look like. That team is chosen by a national tournament team winning manager. And from all accounts, the team that won that national championship was a bit of a Cinderella story. That could be a good or a bad thing for Chinese Taipei. But I just can't imagine that this team is not going to be competitive. I mean, when you look at past results in this tournament, Chinese Taipei have played in the World Championship final in each of the last 3 U-18 World Cups. So I don't think we can just dismiss a team like Chinese Taipei simply because we think the United States are going to be better and that Japan is under all this pressure to play in Okinawa. Chinese Taipei was under that same pressure last year and still made it to the World Championship final, ultimately losing to Japan in that World Championship game. So I think, if anything, if people are coming into this tournament maybe sleeping a little bit on Chinese Taipei, I think that's a mistake. I don't think you can sleep on any sort of Chinese Taipei team at any level. And coming off of a Premier 12 championship, the CTBA probably slightly disappointed that they didn't medal. First time they didn't medal in a U12 World Cup a month or so ago. And don't forget that this is a national team program that is now number 2 in the world. There's still some 1,500 points behind Japan, but the only way to bridge that gap, if the goal for the CTBA and for Chinese Taipei is to someday become the number 1 national team program in the world, then ultimately you got to win tournaments like this. You got to beat Japan in big games. So for me, it's an intriguing outlook because, you think about Japan. We talked about Japan and Korea a lot in Group A. We think that United States team is going to be good here in Group B. I'm just warning everybody, don't sleep on Chinese Taipei. And if you do so at your own peril.
You're 100% right, because everyone's talking about Japan, and they should be talking about Japan. You heard Jeff Duda in the last podcast talk about players that can throw in the upper 90s. They're the best tournament team in the world. I get it. But can you name me the team that beat Japan at the 2024 Asian Under-18 Championships? That won it all.
Chinese Taipei.
Chinese Taipei, baby. So Chinese Taipei have some players, dude. And the team that won this high school tournament is legit. You don't win the Chinese National High School or Chinese Taipei National High School Tournament without being good, right? So they've got at the time of recording 36 players, and they're going to cut down the team to 20. We don't even know what this Chinese Taipei team is at the time of recording. All we know is the data that suggests good high school team that beat Japan at the under-18 championships in Asia, team that is the reigning Premier 12 champions, and country that's second in the world at baseball. They should be going through to the super round with the USA. I think for me, the battle is who's that third spot. I actually have USA and Chinese Taipei penciled in already playing in the super round. And then the other four teams, there you can make a case kind of for all of them about why they could be that third team in the super round.
Yeah, and the other thing I left out about Chinese Taipei, obviously, would be the disappointment from Shaoxing in China last year, not even making it into the super round. So when you look back at the last two underage World Cups, Chinese Taipei, you could say, have underperformed to their standards. Last September, not making a super round in an under-23s, and then for the first time not playing for a gold medal at the U-12s, and then ultimately falling to Korea in that bronze medal game. It's a CTBA program that's going to have a bit of hunger coming into this tournament, and I think the pressure's off because they're not hosting. Maybe it's a team that people say, okay, well, maybe they're not as strong as what they've been in past years. And look, the participation numbers skew it a little bit because Japan has not participated in this tournament historically as much as Chinese Taipei have. But when you look at the number of medals across countries, across national team programs, historically in this World Cup, the United States lead with 27 total medals, 10 gold, 12 silver, and 5 bronze. But there at number 2 is old reliable Chinese Taipei. 20 times they have medaled across the history of this tournament. 3 gold, 10 silver, 7 bronze, which tells you they've played for a world championship at U-18s on 13 occasions. So, look, I'm just saying, I'll make my point. I'll sit down, Your Honor, but all I'm saying is sleep on this team to potentially your own demise.
Here's the thing, though, on the counter argument. China is playing Chinese Taipei first, and China's the wild card. I can take it to the bank that China will be throwing their ace versus Chinese Taipei in the opening game of the Under-18 World Cup. Try to start it off with a win and try to cause an upset. Chinese Taipei then play the USA in their second game. So while the pressure might be a little bit off, if China upsets Chinese Taipei in the first game, oh my goodness, they are staring down the barrel of an 0-2 start, similar to Korea at the World Baseball Classic, how they had to go with Australia, then Japan. They lost to Australia 8-7 at the World Baseball Classic, and then Japan beat them kind of on script. And then all of a sudden, Korea was 0-2 at the start of the World Baseball Classic. The pressure could get turned up really quickly, and that's interesting scheduling by the WBSC that you have. Yeah, you go right into it with China. You win that game, fine. You can kind of set yourself up. But again, China, that ace for China could be pretty good. We just don't know.
Yeah, and it just goes to show what we've been talking about through each of these previews is that you can't ease into a tournament like this because you look at day 5 the same way you look at day 1, the same way you look at day 9 of a tournament like this. You go, this is a team that we need to build because the schedule for the rest of the way looks like this. If Chinese Taipei drop their first 2 games, they still have winnable games against Panama, Germany, and Australia, you would think. So their tournament isn't necessarily over, but you're right. The heat cranks up because it's like, look, we're 0-2. We can't afford to drop another game. We're looking now all of a sudden at the prospect of missing a super round in a U-23s and a U-18. So, yeah, it's a good point. The pressure may not be on them from a home hosting standpoint, but if they drop the first 2 games in group play, I think definitely the pressure would start to be felt by that team.
It's going to be hot and heavy from the start of the World Baseball Softball Confederation Under-18 World Cup presented by Raxus. You can watch on GameTime.sport around the world, although check your country's local listings because a few countries do have TV deals depending where you're from and where you're watching from. The best way to get the updated information is the WBSC website, wbsc.org. Big thanks to our Group A preview guest, Jeff Duda and Tyler Maun, and Group B, Jason Pospishil and Tyler Maun, and yourself, Andrew Reynolds. But yeah, looking forward to it. I know you'll be on the calls. I'll be watching closely, but it's this week where we get to play ball. I think what the plan from here is we're going to jump in after day 2 is the plan. Unless things get crazy with rain, then it might be after day 3. But you and I will jump back on and update everybody how those first 2 days of the tournament have gone and maybe share what we've learned, if we've learned anything at all from those first 2 days of the tournament. Does that sound about right to you?
Yeah, you're not allowed to say the R word in the lead up to and during these tournaments. You're not allowed to talk about rain. There is some in the forecast in Okinawa, but hopefully it will avoid us. And as you talked about, Tyler and I will both be on the ground covering that tournament. So we'll try and grab Tyler on a couple of occasions in some of those episodes where we break things down heading into the Super Round and then beyond. But yeah, absolutely looking forward to it, man. There's no better time of the year than this time of the year when we're talking international baseball, underage World Cups, so much intrigue, and hey, the next round of superstars will be born in 10 days of baseball, and I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you very much, Rolsey. Have a great call. I'll be listening, and we'll chat very soon. Hope you learned a little something from our previews. Make sure you like and subscribe to Baseball Expats and drop us a line if there's anything you'd like to know about any of these baseball nations. Maybe we can help. Enjoy the tournament, everybody. Happy baseball.